So we now have before us all our 8 presenters. And we wanted to do, this is kind of a group conversation moment, but I thought it would be kind of a wonderful moment for them to think a little bit about kind of Jay's ideas and in some ways his legacy. It's clear that I know that Jay would cringe at the word legacy, but his thoughts, ideas, and practices are alive and well, and kind of in all of you, kind of engaging with his material. But I'm curious to kind of go around a little bit to think about a key idea, practice, thought, or something that you think should and will have influence for the next generation of scholars, as we're thinking about kind of Jay's ideas kind of living on beyond this room.
Oh, we're going to start with me.
You have to go. And do you need popcorn?
Okay.
It can be popcorn.
Do we need a?
Yeah. Yeah?
Okay. Well, here.
No.
Okay. Is this on? No.
No.
It says it's on.
Try having.
Is it on?
No. That's ours.
We did the Indian thing?
So is this a true or a false microphone?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, I'll speak loudly. Okay. I talked about this a little bit already in my talk, but I mean, I think one of the things that I have learned from Jay, I mean, we could all talk about the things that we've learned philosophically from Jay. I mean, that's a given. But I mean, I think for me, the most impactful thing that I have learned from Jay, and one of the things that, hello? And one of the things that I have tried to carry on into my career is collegiality. Jay is an incredible colleague, and he is incredibly generous. I'm generous with his time, generous with his, anybody who, I'm seeing students in the room nodding their heads. I mean, Jay reads student essays for, you know, a 200 level class with the same care that he reads, you know, that he edits an academic journal article that's been submitted for review. And the way that Jay works to include people, works to include students, not just graduate students, but undergrads. I mean, it's so rare. And the fact that his teaching extends beyond just being in the classroom, and it extends to really everything that he does, is just remarkable. And I know everyone in this room who has spent any time with Jay knows exactly what I'm talking about. I'm seeing a lot of people nodding their heads. So I mean, I think all of us, you know, we could talk about the interesting things that we've learned from Jay philosophically, but I think in terms of Jay's just overwhelming generosity, I think that's the most important thing that I'm taking away from the time that I've known Jay. And I realized, Davey, I've also known Jay for more than half my life, which is so weird. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna start crying if I talk more. So.
I'm afraid I'm gonna start crying. Maybe following Connie's point, like Dave takes that. What am I talking about? Jay always takes the students very seriously. So as a model of teaching is very inspiring, and that is a big takeaway. I think even if they're like radically challenging him consistently, he takes that seriously and engages it without dismissing it. Maybe a point about logic, because we should talk about that at some point too. Jay has he likes to dilate the other, maybe just hair consistency. But underneath that, there really is like a logical pluralism that's accepted. And that's the really nice model of engaging logic, because it takes every kind of logical thing as modeling something. So find the right logic for that specific thing you're after, and that opens up a lot of radical ways of addressing and developing logic. There's a takeaway there as
Okay, well, we told to come up with an idea first, and then it was expanded. We can talk about attributes. So the idea was, well, I didn't encourage to start with causation, that 2418. And then attributes. So building on what Connie has said, one of the pedagogical techniques that Jay employed was commenting. We had the next day draft service. And the thing is, the comments on the draft they were, paper, back in the days of paper, and they were scribbled, and you couldn't actually, there was no way to understand them, unless you went to the office hours and asked about them, in which case then you got a really, clear, idea of, the good idea that you had that you didn't say, but he's just articulating for you. And then by the time you've cracked the code, you've actually learned to write. It takes a couple of years, but that was, very important for me in my development.
Yeah, seconding these, the
Idea first.
idea first. Well, moral phenomenology has been one of the kind of crucial things for me thinking about how to think about ethics in the last 5-10 years, especially. And I think that has so much legs. Or not, but that's just a really profound idea. So many legs. It's just such a profound and important idea. Jay's pedagogy has been the absolute model for me. And I did not get to teach much in graduate school, and when I first got a job, I am still trying to figure out what I'm doing in the classroom. But that asymptotic limit is the experience of coming out of some of your classes when I was an undergraduate, feeling like magic had happened. You had somehow made us realize these things. Ourselves, we had come to it. It was just absolute pinnacle of Socratic method. And the commenting too, I remember you once commented on a paper of mine where I was a Hampshire undergraduate trying to write like Heidegger. You cannot write like this. Well, it's true. and I needed someone to tell me that. If they weren't telling me that. That was just, that kind of voice. That kind of voice has been in my ear and has come to me. And it's a.
You need a wrathful manifestation.
Yes, exactly. Teach the corrupted.
So idea first, I guess I kind of did it with foreshadowing in my talk that moral phenomenology has been really influential, not just on my philosophical views. Well, I guess they're all philosophical views in some way, but a really important one of what it means to be a good person. I take that question extremely seriously. More so outside of just academia or career or something like that. And yeah, that's really a gift. It's really a gift to me and to all of us. In terms of attributes, this isn't an attribute that's specific to Jay, but it's one that I love and I feel like Jay embodies, and that's his orientation towards taking philosophy seriously. Not just taking it as learning about what some other people said, not taking it as a game that is let's figure out, how to make this logical puzzle work. That's all involved, absolutely, right? But the orientation towards these ideas, as I think you put it, live ideas, not historical artifacts, but things that can help, things that we can adopt and which can then shape our lives, and bringing that same orientation into the classroom, where I'm hoping to share with students not just what so-and-so said, but helping to try and guide them into their picture of what a good life is. And you've really embodied that orientation towards philosophy and really taught me how to model it myself as a philosopher. Thank you.
I'll start with my idea, which is just from my paper, but this notion that ethics is not an account of what the good is or what it is like to be good, but interested in how to become good.
Yeah.
Between that and the Halcyon-Hansen first-person perspective on karma, those are the things I always return to, that at the center of this is a subject trying to live in the world in a better way and not cause the harms that we've caused in the past. One thing I think will be important that you've embodied is knowledge not as just like adding one damn thing on top of another, like the accumulation of facts, but the process of education and knowledge as the transformation of experience on the part of students. I'm sure it's a pressure on all of us as AI can generate, like honestly, a pretty good freshman essay, and we are expected to implement it in our classes and things like that. We'll all together need to make the argument that, no, this is not just trying to cram more facts into students' heads, but letting them have the experiences others have said of coming to these ideas and feeling them relevant for their own lives. And then for me personally, I was really touched. So some of you may have been there, but at AAR there was a reception in honor of Jay, and there were too many people who wanted to speak, which is a great problem to have. But I was just struck at your response, all these people being grateful to you, and you said, everything that I've given was given to me. And I really do hold that out as a goal for myself, that, you know, someday if I ever get to retire,
Retirement's off the table, he says.
pick up the AI bots, that like I really do want to be able to be the kind of person who's worthy of that gratitude and to do the work now of paying forward what I have, knowing that it comes back. That's very generosity. So thank you so much.
Thank you for getting the waterworks going. I'm a crier, so I'm just going to lay that out there for all of you. My idea, I think, I mean, I started my talk with it, the whole emptiness of emptiness business. Like, you know, it's a real, you know, a really seductive paradox to grapple with as a young person. But I mean, through all of my career, I think if I look at like the thing that really mattered and really drives me is this idea or this question about truth. And even if you are going to adopt an anti-realist, like full-on global anti-realist, like if you're going to go that way, that truth still matters. And I think this comes out in Jay's works a lot, in that it's not enough to, even conventional truth matters. It's not just the ultimate truth, but we live in the conventional one, and what's true and what's false matters in that world too. And so we should be able to give, you know, a respectable, consistent with Buddhist account of what that truth is like. And I think I'm still looking for that truth. Even if it's less empty. Jay was like. Another thing that I think is worth noting, and Jay and I were talking about it earlier, is that he really has done a lot to change professional philosophy to be more inclusive of non-Western traditions, and I don't think that can be overstated. The doors that he's opened, the minds he has changed, the opportunities he has made possible for those of us who do this work in philosophy departments. And that's a legacy that I think will only grow, and I think he is passing the baton on to the rest of us to like continue that work, to demonstrate the value of Buddhist philosophy, non-Western philosophy, and to advocate for it in the spaces in which we exist. So I will continue that work. That's my promise to you, Jay. And then in terms of like his mentorship, I have like a funny thing. When we first sat down, I think it might have been the very first meeting. When we were sitting down, he's like, I will be your external committee member. And he gave me this story about miracles. And he may have told other people this story, but he told me to, and I still tell it to my students. And he's like, the only real miracle is producing something out of nothing. The rest is just alchemy. And he's like, when you write words on a page, you are performing a miracle. There was nothing. And then you wrote it, and it was something. And even if that nothing that you produce, or that something you produce out of nothing was garbage, it would still be miraculous. Like, you'd be really amazed if somebody produced out of thin air a bundle of garbage. So this was his way of convincing me that, like, I shouldn't be scared to just write. To, like, get me going, and then I should be proud, even if my first draft is total and complete garbage. Like, I should be proud of that. And the rest I can transform. It's alchemy, and I could do it. And that was really important advice to me to get me going, because, you know, writing a dissertation is daunting. So it was nice to just be like, just go for it. So I really appreciate that. And that's a story I share with my own students now, to get them to just write, especially when they're blocked. And the other thing I would point, which I sometimes still laugh about, is that there was a couple drafts where he would give me comments and he would circle and he's like, is this the metaphorical use of therefore? That's sort of an indication that maybe there was a little bit more argument than I needed to present. So I use that one too now too. In my students. I'm like, is this the metaphorical use of therefore?
So I don't know where to begin. I mean, so I feel I've been called one of Jay's kids, but I feel I'm also in some sense a collaborator of sorts. Jay and I go back, I think, further than the rest of my panelists here. And on the professional side, I want to say that Jay's legacy is going to be the many collaborative projects and collaborative relationships that he established over the years with fellow colleagues, particularly in the mainstream profession. I don't think that work would have done so far had it not been for his successful work with Grand Priest, with his collaboration with Sean Nichols. I take some pride in the fact that I did introduce him to Sean Nichols. And so I'd like to take a bit of credit for that. And as some of you know, Jay and I, together with Evan Thompson, run 288 Summer Institutes that some people here have benefited from that. And I feel like, in that sense, yes, his work has been extraordinary. I'll have something to say about that too. But I think by far his legacy, those who are carrying it on, is trying to establish this professional alliances, particularly with people that you may not see eye to eye. And those are by far the most challenging. And I think Jay has been really extraordinarily successful in that, despite a great deal of resistance. It's kind of rather astonishing that he's managed to do that, given the pushback. Now, on the also the kind of the professional level, Jay came on my dissertation committee rather late, and I had the great fortune of him reading my dissertation not once but twice, including me to margin in, like, what were you smoking, Christian? This sounds really weird. Yeah, you got to do better than this. So that was just wonderful, and so take several steps back. Now, I also want to say that I'm perhaps alone among the panelists here. I didn't really follow into Jay's footsteps. I mean, I didn't really find Madhyamaka interesting at the time. I still don't find it interesting. And so maybe that's sort of a big loss to Jay. I don't know, it's a great entity. But I want to say that over the years, Jay and I have had all sorts of interesting conversations. And he is by far, excuse me, the most formidable Purva-Paksha, the most formidable opponent. So this has been sort of his gift to our relationship over the years, that he just won't let you off the hook. I mean, Jay and I barely disagree on some really fundamental issues, but we've had the most wonderful times in all over the world. It hasn't, in no way hasn't affected our friendship and our collaboration. So I think people sort of sometimes take the view that if you bitterly disagree with someone, that you occupy some different positions of the philosophical spectrum, you're somehow not supposed to be able to have a good time with this person. And especially in our culture nowadays, where we tend to sort of, group ourselves into silos and seek people that are like-minded, we lose a great deal when we do that. And I think it's very important to try to sort of cultivate friendships with people that occupy a very different stance than you do philosophically and otherwise. And I think Jay and I, as I said, we have very little in common in terms of our intellectual and philosophical interests, and particularly our views. But yet I count Jay as one of my closest, best friends and mentors, and I think that's one of his really gifts to myself and to the profession at large. Thank you, Jay.
I'll try. It'll be hard. Oh. This will be hard. I didn't succeed in keeping my eyes dry very often today, and it's going to be much harder now. Yeah. So, I'm stepping down after 45 years of professional teaching, but it's been actually 50 years since I first picked up a piece of chalk in my own classroom and taught logic. And at some point that starts feeling like a long time. And I've been blessed with an enormous number of wonderful teachers, wonderful students, wonderful colleagues, and wonderful friends. And for that, I am enormously grateful. And I'm going to call out some names today. And this might get a little boring because I'm going to thank a bunch of people. But there's a point in your life where the most important thing to do is to thank a bunch of people. And damn it, this is one of those times. Like, the most important person to thank is like right over there. That's Blaine Garson. Anybody who knows us knows how much Blaine has been a part of everything that we have done together, and it's just inseparable. So that's just, it's water poured into water. It's just, there's nothing separate between us. And I owe Blaine so much. It's the easiest way to say it is I owe her the life that I've had. And of course, like right now, Andy and Connie for organizing all of this. I mean, that's part of it. It's like, yeah, Connie was a student. Now Connie is a valued and trusted colleague. There have been times when Connie's been a hot show, and that's okay too. As Christian pointed out, being a pot shit doesn't mean not being a great friend. Connie actually also lived with us for a couple of years. I mean, Wayne and I think of Connie as one of our daughters, you know? And that's important too. It's been a friendship that's been so deep and so powerful that it's been, it's been a really important part of my life. And I want to thank you for that, Connie, as well as for everything else. On all of the 8 people who spoke today, I think this is a wonderful, wonderful sample of what people have pointed out. I have that secret file called Jay's Kids, right? I've loved the fact that you guys are doing such diverse things. I love the fact that you're going after me hard. Blaine said yesterday to me that by the end of today that I will look and feel like Saint Sebastian. And I thought that was a really good goal, right? The goal of being a teacher is not to be a cult figure who everybody follows. It's to train people to attack your faults and to point out your errors and to think for themselves. And you listen to these 8 folks today, I'm feeling really, really happy. Really, really, really happy. These were wonderful, wonderful talks. And one of the things that was so powerful about them is that they really, not taking pot shots, they were calling into question some of the difficult points in my own work and sometimes highlighting some value. I'm happy for that too, but I was especially overjoyed by the courage, the honesty, the intellectual integrity, and the brilliance of the people who I've had the enormous privilege of teaching. There's a whole lot of other students and friends here, and I'm not going to name everybody, but some people came from a really long time and surprised the hell out of me. I mean, there's Torin, Alter Torin, where are you? I can't see you right now. There's Torin. Like, Torin I taught in 1981 for the first time. He was one of my very first students in philosophy to go on to graduate school. And he's become a very distinguished philosopher of mind and scholar, and has run the philosophy department at the University of Alabama. So now, like, he's in the Confederacy at this point. I was just blown away that you came here, Tor, and I'm just really, really grateful. Haley Haruda came back all the way from Chicago here, somebody who worked with me at Smith and is now on her way to becoming a superstar in the field. Eugene Ha came in. Eugene, where are you? There's Eugene. Yeah, it was a great research assistant of mine, as was Haley. Alexandra came all the way from the West Coast. I couldn't believe that. Yifa came. I mean, Yifa's got a really busy life, and she's, on the other hand, I always think that Yifa's everywhere, so of course she's here. But I'm just so very, very grateful. Mark came up. I'm really happy. Thank you, Mark. That's really fabulous. And of course, Jamie and Lois. Just all of these really dear friends and colleagues who have made my life what it is, and Maria and Steve, and I could just start, I could do this for too long, and if I would be careful. So, yes, it's been pretty wonderful. So, at this point, I would say that two things that a few decades of working on Buddhist philosophy have taught me, maybe not much, maybe not taught me very well. One is the importance of dependent origination, and this will be coming back to something that that Kate docked me in for a moment ago, because I'm going to do it again. And the other is the extraordinary importance of gratitude, and the fact that any of us who have been fortunate enough to be a part of anything owe an enormous debt of gratitude to far more people than we will ever have the time to thank. Dependent origination, because as Kate said, all these people have thanked me for things, and everything they've thanked me for, I can identify who I got that from. For instance, when Laura dubbed me in for that, is this the metaphorical sense of therefore? I didn't make that up. That's what my dissertation director used to write on my drafts. So you got that from Newell Belknap. And when I asked Newell about that, he said, yeah, I got that from Alan Anderson, who wrote that on my dissertation. And I'm willing to bet that Alan Anderson got it from Frederick Fitch, but I don't know. But all I can say is there's lineage there. There's lineage there. So the dependent origination part is that none of us ever do anything solo. Everything we do is part of an ensemble performance. And our job is just to be a reasonably cooperative, open part of that complicated improv ensemble that is life. So, it's not just Blaine, but it's also actually my mom who's given me a lot. It's my colleagues over the years, and importantly, it's my students. Because one of the great gifts of teaching, one of the many, I'll talk about gifts of teaching in a minute, one of those is that we get to hang out with students and get to learn so much from them. Because when I look at the 8 people here, when I look at a lot of the people back around the wall there, and people over here, I don't see people to whom I've taught stuff primarily. I see people from whom I've learned stuff. Like from Karl, I learned a lot about the Baba Macromans, a lot. From Davey, I've learned so much about Tantra. From Karin, I once learned the words to Chuba Woman, but I've forgotten them now. But lots of other stuff besides. I'm being a little facetious, and I can go around for almost everybody in here and talk about what I've learned from them. So I really do think that anything that you take to have got from me, you in fact got from the people who passed it on to me and through, and that it came to you only through me, not so much from me. And that's really important. So I just want to talk a little bit about your lineage, right? Because that's the other thing that we learn in Buddhist philosophy. The lineage is really important. Not just in ordination lineages, not just tantric initiation lineages. Those are really important too, but I'm talking about teaching lineages. So I just want to acknowledge, some of the people who have taught me primarily, who therefore have indirectly taught you. And I'm not going to go all the way back to my primary school teachers, and that's going to get really too boring, and that just gets a little maudlin at some point, right? But, let me just start with the people who first taught me philosophy in college, and that was Norman, Karin, Bob Grimm at Oberlin. I didn't go to college thinking I wanted to do philosophy. In fact, I knew what I wanted to do, and it wasn't philosophy. But it was when I took my first philosophy class, by accident, literally by accident, by choosing it at random from a catalog like this, from their paper catalogs, that Norman Karin opened up Hume's treatise for me. And I just looked at that and said, my God, if philosophy can do this, I want to do philosophy. Now, part of that's because of Hume, but a lot of that was because Norman knew how to teach Hume. And Bob Grimm, who worked with me on Wittgenstein's Tractatus, where we were working on paradoxes of ineffability, and that opened me up to the idea of paraconsistency, which of course everybody knows has been the thing that people ridicule me most for, probably, but that's driven a lot of my life. When I was in graduate school at Pittsburgh, the three people who really I would want to point to were all influences for you. One is Annette Beyer, who taught us all how to read Hume. Annette Beyer, who taught us the importance of the imagination and the importance of, that's where all my thinking about imagination came from, Davey. That's where a lot of yours comes from. And who taught us the importance of the emotions as ways of knowing, not just things that happen to us. That was Annette, who was one of the kindest, most generous teachers you could possibly imagine, and one of the most severe. You think the shit I wrote on your papers was bad. You should have seen what Annette would write on mine, right? But it was all out of enormous kindness. A second was Noah Belknap, from whom I learned relevant logic and paraconsistent logics and other weird logics. And it was Noel who taught me, I think, the most about how to teach, because he was a consummate classroom teacher. And he taught me the importance of helping students learn how to read by learning how to write. And the idea that the way you get somebody to read something is make them write something about it. So, several people have commented on my practice of using written work as a ticket to class, something that I've always done, and that I learned from Newell, but I also learned from Newell logical pluralism. But then also, the big one I haven't mentioned yet is Wilfrid Sellars, to whom I'm indebted for virtually every philosophical idea I've ever had, and for every philosophical idea I've ever passed on. And some of you are contributors to that volume on Sellars and Buddhist philosophy. Wilfrid, of course, would be turning over in his grave if he knew that he'd suddenly become a figure in Buddhist studies. One of the funniest things that happened to me ever was when I was teaching at Yale a bunch of years ago, when I was supposed to teach 2 graduate seminars in the philosophy department. And I wanted to teach a graduate seminar on Buddhist philosophy and a graduate seminar on modern Indian philosophy. And Shelley Kagan, who was chair then, said, no, it's going to be hard enough to get anybody to take a course on non-Western philosophy. You can't possibly teach 2 of them. There will be no students in them. I said, all right. So I said, well, maybe I'll teach, because Wilfrid taught at Yale for over a decade. I'll come back and teach a course on Sellars as well as a course on Buddhist philosophy. Well, the course on Buddhist philosophy was packed with philosophy students who were so happy to find me a non-Western course. But the course on Buddhist for Karl was in this one. The course on Sellars was entirely people from the Div school who thought, finally, something relevant to Buddhism in the Div school. Because the philosophy students didn't even have name recognition for Wilfrid Sellars. So that's an interesting one. But yeah, so much from, and honestly, so that's But the other part of the lineage then, and the part that I think is really, really important, is when I started studying Buddhism, finally, a long time after I finished my PhD, I always say practicing without a license, because I never was able to, I didn't finish my PhD not knowing there was such a thing as non-Western philosophy, let alone Buddhist philosophy. And I learned all of that here in the valley, and elsewhere when I came here and was dragged into it, kicking and screaming by students. But the person, well, a couple of people, but one person I want to single out who taught me very early and very well was Bob Thurman, who was a wonderful and patient mentor, and of course, wildly enthusiastic. And so when we talk about Bob, the lineage there takes us back to Geshe Wangyal. And it's really important we all remember that it was Geshe Wangyal who really first brought the Tibetan tradition to the United States in an academic way. And he taught both Jeffrey Hopkins and Bob Thurman at the same time. It was kind of scary. But yes, so that's important. But then when I was fortunate enough to go to India for the first time, I had the enormous, enormous privilege of studying with Geshe Topka, with whom I've studied many times since then. Some of you have got to study with Geshe before, and if you have, then you know he is not only perhaps the kindest human being who's ever walked the face of the earth, but the most powerful, penetrating intellect of 20th century Buddhist studies. And you read Geshe Topka's work and you know you're in the hands of a master. You study with Geshe Topka, and you know that you've done something right in a previous life. That's what the only thing that leads me to take Karin's view seriously. Nothing I've ever done in the present life could possibly have merited my friendship and my being able to be the student of Geshe Topka. Patrul Rinpoche writes words of my perfect teacher, and I often think that a lot of my work in Madhyamaka could just be titled that, because almost all of it comes from Geshe. It's just staggering. But that's the lineage that you've got. Okay, that's the important thing to see. I'm not like the person who taught you. I'm the person who passed all of this through to you, and all I ask is that you keep passing it along. Teaching to me has always been an enormous gift. I cannot remember a day of teaching when I didn't wake up saying, God, I get to teach today, it's going to be so much fun. And it's never got old. I still, even if I'm getting up on a Tuesday when I have to drive all the way up to Harvard to teach, and I have to kind of deal with Tasha, asking questions the whole way out. Sorry, Tasha. I'm so impressed with Tasha. Anyway, the magic of the classroom has never worn off, and I hope it never wears off for any of you. I can't imagine what it would be like for that to happen, because then teaching would suddenly be a chore. And if it was a chore, then it would be a horrible chore. I always find it magical. It's hard for me to think of a class situation where I didn't learn a lot, a class situation where I didn't smile a lot. And for that, again, I'm enormously grateful. Primarily grateful to my students and also to my many co-teachers. I've co-taught with Lois, I've co-taught with Jake Henley, who is here, I've co-taught with Andy and I are co-teaching now. I've just co-taught with so many people, and that's been a wonderful thing, because you learn from each of those people, but you also learn an enormous amount from your students and from the activity of teaching itself. And you get that kind of immersion into a text that you can only get if you know you've got to talk about it to somebody else, and you're being held responsible for helping somebody else into it. I don't want to say for telling people what's in there, but for helping somebody else to enter that text. That's a huge responsibility. And it's a responsibility that, like Shantideva says when he's talking about, that fear of death, right? To me, it's like the fear of, letting students down. It's a big motivator to actually get there and so that means you actually learn more. And that's just absolutely terrific. I think the classroom's been an enormous gift. Several people, again, mentioned that list, Jay's kids. And that leads me to a confession. And this is this is a confession of sin. Buddha Buddhaghosa, again, I want to just thank Maria for kind of forcing me to take Buddhaghosa seriously in a way that I never had before I fell under Maria's tutelage. And I've learned a lot from Buddhaghosa since then, and I sort of, every time I think about Buddhaghosa, my gratitude to Maria grows. But anyway, Buddhaghosa, one of his great contributions is to identify the difference between near enemies and far enemies of the Brahma-viharas. And one of the differences between Buddhism and the tradition in which I was raised, Judaism, is that one of the attitudes that's prized in Judaism is a near enemy, as Buddhaghosa points out. And it's the near enemy of Maitri, or metta, and it's nachas. It's that special joy that we take in the accomplishment of our children. Now, if I was a really good person, I would be immune to that. And I would be as happy about the successes of somebody else's students as I am about mine. But I'm going to confess, I am not that person. I am not a good person. I just take so much joy in watching the brilliant accomplishments, I mean really brilliant, of not just the 8 people around here, but there's about 50 of them now. And that gift of that much nachas is one of the things that teaching has to give us. Like I say, don't accept that gift because it would make you as sinful and bad a person as I am and fall into that terrible partiality. But, you know, to paraphrase Shantideva in a tortured way, if you've got to lick something from a razor blade, at least let it be honey. And, you know, given that we're all eating from razor blades, I'm really grateful for that honey. And to be grateful for that is to be grateful to my students, because they're the ones who have brought that to me. And so I guess what I want to say most is to thank those around this table, especially those who've been talking here, but also people like Karin and Haley, is that I just want to thank you more than anything for your lives and for your accomplishments and for the good that I know that you're doing for your colleagues, for your institutions, for your students, for our profession, and especially for these really well-aimed arrows today, which I thought, you know, they're there. And so as I get ready to kind of step off this stage and to hand over my persona as a teacher and go adopt a new one as some old retired guy hanging out with his dogs on a remote beach. It's a slightly different life. I just want to say that I know I can do that happily because you guys are doing just fine. The kids are all right. And, I can walk away happy. Thank you very much.